So accessing information on the internet is not actually all that difficult. The difficult part is making meaning of that. I mean, you're getting a bunch of data coming in. I got to go find information for that. And that's really what we're going to focus on here. So let's imagine for a second that we're writing a program and our program is time sensitive. So it might seem ridiculously simple, but it is a case where sometimes your application, especially for real-time embedded applications, are going to have very simple code just to make sure it's situationally aware. So, for example, is my current clock time accurate? If there's a power cycle or something like that, your computer clock might be behind, especially if the battery glitches or something like that. So it's perfectly reasonable to have your application go up and check, hey, what is the time right there? So, for example, in this case, we're going to use this website time.is. And you can see my clock apparently is a half second off of the time that it thinks it is, its atomic clock. So, my sync service isn't working all that well, if you consider a half second off. But this is a place where we can get time. It's time in HTML. Now, again, we're going to ignore the fact that there probably are ways to get time that is not having to go to an HTML page. But I have written applications for this internally. I've written monitors that go to our own company's website just to make sure that it's active and it's doing stuff. It's what's called a health monitoring solution. So this type of application is very reasonable. So what I want to do is I want to go into this website, I want to visit it, and I want to get the time and be able to report that time from our software. So when I say get web date, you can see my hope is to return the current time from a website that's out there. So I've given you some structure on how you can approach this, and the test actually, because it's something you can submit to Gradescope, is actually going to test my code version of this. So you're going to kind of have to check it by hand to some degree, um, because I'm only going to be looking at the day, month, and year in the test case here. But the we could get more accurate than that as well as far as seconds and whatnot goes. So, oops, sorry, I hit clicked on something here. So anyway, it jumped up. So let's dive into this and start with the analysis of what we're looking for. So the Python structure here is going to allow us to read in information from the web and parse it by creating an HTML parser. So this is a little bit of advanced Python trickery here, where we're creating our own class called WebDate, and we're implementing it using an existing class, a notion called inheritance, called HTML parser that Python provided for us. You can see HTML.parser, we've imported that. And so the parser allows us to look for start tags, data, and end tags as it processes HTML for us. And so think of it this way. Python's going to act like I don't know, like let's just say the Python's going to receive it and they're just going to read stuff out loud. And so every time it sees the start of a tag, we have an H1 tag, it's going to yell that out. And our code then can look and listen for that and do something every time a tag is created, and we can listen for that. So that means we need to understand the structure of the code to be able to go find where this data is. So how would you do that? How would you go find the structure of an HTML document? Well, I'm using Chrome, but every browser has some form of this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the thing I want to see, and I'm going to go to in Chrome to this thing called inspect. And when I do that, you can see it opens up this big nasty HTML window here. But inside of there, I can see a div tag from the HTML world. And inside of that div tag is the Friday, 18 February, 2022. The date that is right there, and then there's the time that shows up as well. But I believe I'm just looking for the date here. I don't care about the time. Um, so, how do I find it? Well, I know I need to care about div tags. So when a div tag starts, at that point, I care about the data inside of it. But which div tag? Well, I need a specific div tag. I need a way of identifying it. So there's an ID here which says DD. So in theory, if I go find a div tag with an ID of DD, the next thing to come in the date in the data field should be Friday, 18 February 2022. The day I'm recording this. So that is the investigation I can do to go find my data. Now, data sometimes is very hard to find a web page. It's sometimes very easy to find a web page, depending on how well that web developer organized their HTML data. And this is an incentive for you to either create well-formed pages that makes it easy, or intentionally obscure pages that makes it very difficult for people to find data on your pages. There's no reason to obscure it per se, because you can almost always find some clever way to find it and code a pattern in there. But just it is perhaps a strategy to hide data by being obscure, and it's called obfuscation, essentially, is a fancy word there. But we'll come. I digress. I'm off topic. So. Um, let's consider then how we can approach this in our code. So instead of being ridiculously fancy and jumping straight to a solution, let's just look at what's coming in here. What the heck does a sucker even mean? So I'm going to just do a print um, tag comma atrs to kind of see what the heck is happening here as start tags. We'll deal with data, we'll deal with end tags later, because we'll just get overwhelmed with data if we do it otherwise. But I'm going to just have this here, so when we're ready, we can see how this works. But before we ever get there, we got to do something to connect the URL and even get data start coming in. That's the first part. But I just want to think ahead to say, like, okay, well, I want to just see all the tags that are coming. So we'll come back to that in a second. So let's get into the idea of how we get data. So the importing of the right class is going to help you a lot here. So what we need is an import for what's called requests. And this is Python's ability to request stuff over the internet right there. And so by importing that, then that allows me to go ahead and go get something. So I'm going to get a response. And I'm going to do that by saying requests.get. And what am I going to get? Well, I'm going to get something from the URL I have. And that's going to give me my response there. All right. So with that, then I can basically go print the response. And that'll validate the fact that I'm just getting anything back whatsoever. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. Oh, so I got a 403. All right. So a response was a 403. So what does a 403 mean? Well, 403 is a forbidden error. 403 says you are not allowed to access the resource you asked for. This is the many reasons you could do that. One could be you're required to log in and go access it that way. But in this case, the issue is a little bit more subtle. When I just send in a bare request like this, what ends up happening is I'm sending a request as if I'm a Python program. And that maybe, I'm guessing here, maybe something that this website doesn't want to have happen. Maybe they have an API for you to go off and get time directly, and they don't want you hitting their HTML site with all the extra fluff on top of it. So they don't want you processing it that way. I don't know if that's the case, but one of the things I want to show you, and here's what I'm going to actually do. I'm going to just copy and paste this. So that way I get it entirely correct, and then I'll make this available to you as well, so you can go off and use it as well. But you can see there's headers. By the way, I'm going to make it available. I'm going to put it in the comments of this video. I'll put it down below so you can find it there. And you probably can find it a couple other places as well. But there's this thing called headers. So remember when we talked about HTML before, we talked about HTML having headers as far as the the browser information that is requesting it. It gets passed along as part of the browser. And so the user agent here, what we're saying is we're pretending we're going to be a Mozilla browser on Windows NT. Now, it doesn't matter if you're actually on Mac or whatever like that. It's just giving some information because it also talks about Apple WebKit inside of here, and then the Chrome and a bunch of different stuff, all the different browsers you can have. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass along the headers as part of the response. So there are a couple different ways that you can go off and access the internet through Python, but we're going to use the requests because that allows us to say the headers is equal to the headers as a parameter here. And by putting these headers out there, I believe, assuming the website hasn't changed since I created this demo, oh, now we see we get a response 200. Now it doesn't tell us what's out here, and there's still some other coding issues that we're not dealing with. Line 61 here. Let's see options. Show line numbers. Yeah, so in the test we're still getting a failure because we're not getting a date back. But that's okay. We're right now we're just returning a blank. But what we can say is, hey, we have we have the access to the website. We're no longer getting it forbidden. We're getting some data. So how the heck do we see what that data is? Well, again, response is an unknown type. So let's just say oh shoot, now I forgot my Python. We looked at this a long time ago. Is it type? Yeah. So let's run this again real quick. And we can see the response is a class. It's a request.models.response, and it has stuff inside of it. And by default, it's just printing out what the response was. It's not actually printing out the HTML directly for you at all. So if we want to see the HTML, we don't actually get the response. But what we need is, if we want the HTML, we can say response.read. And then we're going to use a .decode on that. Well, here, let me just show you real quick what it's without the recode. So instead of print the response, let's print the HTML. And just to show you, just to show you what I'm talking about here, let's print the type of the HTML. Let's do that first, actually. HTML will be longer. But let's go ahead and print that out real quick. So I'm going to run this. Response has no attribute read. It's because I put. Did I do that wrong? Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm using the wrong one. I apologize. It's just text. It's the other way of accessing that I need. Just the text inside there. So we can see the text is a string, and it's 678 lines of text, which is the HTML of that page we just saw. So a whole bunch of stuff going on this page just for us to get the specific date in this case. So we sent the request with this fancy header, and the HTML response then allows you to get the HTML from that. But we don't want to print the HTML. We don't even want to have to parse that HTML by hand. What we're going to do is we're going to take advantage of the fact that we are an HTML parser. We've created a class that is an HTML parser itself. And so self is the object that is us. We are ourselves. Dot feed, we're going to feed in the HTML to be processed by us internally. All right. So this now will send the HTML to the HTML parser, which will in turn call things like handle start tag. And so now when we run this, we're gonna change this around. So let me actually close this to start with a fresh window. And when I run it, we're going to be able to see the HTML tags being parsed. So let me pause here and let you get to this point and make sure your code is working up to this point. And so you can see all the different HTML tags. And we'll explain more about this in a minute, but we've been going for a while. So let me give you a break, catch up to this point, make sure you have your code. Let me show it to you. working through this point, you have your connection going. If not, reach out for help right away, and then we'll continue after a short break.